Welcome, everyone. We think we've managed to sort out the tech. It's lovely to have you with us this afternoon. Welcome to the second in our Excellence in Leadership webinar series, which is led by Nadine, and we'll be focusing on an introduction to middle leadership. Middle leadership is that first step into leadership and management in a school, and it can be a really varied role. And for the most part, you're still a classroom teacher as well as leading in school, but your expertise and experience is going to help to shape the practice of your whole school. Nadine is an experienced school leader herself, and her role at BEP has given her the opportunity to have positive and impactful experiences with middle leaders in schools all across Birmingham. So today she's going to share her wisdom and insights with you all. Little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, do add them to the questions at the bottom. And I think, Nadine, we've said we're going to deal with them at the break and at the end.
Yes, we
if there's anything urgent, put it in the chat and I'll do my best to monitor that as well. And just to remind you all that this is being recorded and it will be shared with you afterwards as well. And with that, I will hand over to Nadine.
Thank you very much, Claire. And thank you to everyone for coming along. So I'm just going to get my screen up and then we should be good to go. Okay, lovely. So, oops, on the wrong page already. So as Claire said, we are looking at the second in a series of Excellence in Leadership webinars. This afternoon, I am going to take you through this agenda. Just to give you full disclosure, I sometimes talk just from experience. I might be adding in anecdotes, things I've seen on visits, things that I've come across within my own practice. If I go off topic slightly, I will come back. We will cover it all. It may and may not be exactly in the order that it's presented there. But I want to cover why schools even need subject leaders, how to lead with impact and influence, even when you've got barely any release time, thinking about the school leadership system, how to make it work for you, your subject report, if you're required to put one together, what to include, what to leave out. I'm going to touch only briefly on the role of assessment. There is a specific webinar on assessment, so I'm not going to get into that in very much detail, but I'm going to cover that just briefly. We're going to spend probably about quite a bit of time thinking about your subject in relation to Ofsted, leadership materials, all of those things, and then a little bit around action planning and your school's SDP, school development plan. And we will put a break in somewhere around 2:40. It might be a bit earlier, a bit later, just depending on where I'm up to, but there will be a chance for you to go out and stretch your legs. Okay, so let's get into this then. So in terms of thinking about subject leadership, it's your first step from classroom leadership, being really good at leading your classroom and the learning and education that's happening there, and popping your head up and taking a more of a whole school, a wider perspective. And I love this anecdote that Dylan William comes out with every time I've either met him or been on training or watched his videos or whatever. So in terms of formative assessment, then he has this analogy about the way pilots don't execute their role. So his analogy then, so you're flying from Edinburgh to London. The pilot knows they need to go due south, 180 degrees. They're going to be flying for about 45 minutes into moderate wind. So the pilot goes off then and flies for 45 minutes, follows the flight plan. At the end of 45 minutes, lands at the nearest airport and then has a look around to see if it's Heathrow. Invariably isn't. And then just tells the passengers, never mind, we'll come back to this next time. The analogy obviously being that if that was in school or in a classroom, we get to the end of a learning experience or we get to a monitoring cycle and we go, oh, okay, never mind, we'll pick it up again. So that's from a classroom perspective. Overlaying that onto a subject leader or a middle leadership role, you're thinking, okay, overall, I want to evaluate my curriculum efficacy. How well is my curriculum going? I've been thinking about spaced retrieval. for example. So you know this is a second exposure for your staff. As a school, you're looking at space retrieval overall. Staff are using it in maths. They're not really using it that much in your subject. So you create some CPD, you deliver that CPD, and you, fingers crossed, hope that everyone gets on with whatever it is you've been asking them to do. You get to a monitoring cycle and you check. And then at that point, you realize that some staff are rocking and rolling and doing it brilliantly, and some staff are not. The overarching thing here then is we've got to check. We cannot just, it's so easy to just say, I've told them, I did it myself. I would put something out about science and just assume that I've shared this information with the staff team. I've told them, and therefore it's automatically happening. Chances are it isn't, is honestly what tends to happen in schools. So this is part of why you are needed as middle leaders. You need a plan, the school needs a plan, and then your role feeds into that school plan. Without it, you could end up anywhere, Heathrow, Gatwick, whatever. But more important than that, you need to be checking on that plan periodically. And I'm going to get into in quite a bit of detail how you do that checking without necessarily having release time from the classroom. The school leadership team have a crucial role to play in terms of subject leadership. However, they can't be everywhere. They can't do everything. There are so many things that come up both in the school day and in general that you're responsible for. Your role is really important in terms of feeding that information into bigger picture school leadership. So you are essentially their eyes and ears. My first head teacher I ever worked with used to say to me, Nadine, if you need to tell me what's happening in your subject before I do. If I find out before you do, we're going to have a conversation. Now, I'm not saying that anybody should lead their schools in that way, but her point was, I need your head teacher and your leadership team need the information from all of the individual subject leaders to bring that jigsaw piece together and have a good understanding about what's happening in school and how you move school forward. You're best placed to know how effective the curriculum is, where you've got some teething issues or things that need to be dealt with, barriers that are stopping teachers from getting on with whatever your current development point is. You can go and address those things early. And you also need to know where your green shoots are. So you will have teachers who get on with it straight away, are doing brilliant, are examples that you can signpost other teachers to in the school. And you want to be able to nurture that and signpost your teachers to that as well. So thinking then about popping your head up, your school will have an SDP, a school development plan. So your role is to work out what are the main priorities that your school are working on, and then how does that link to your particular subject. If your school are looking at oracy, for example, you will be thinking, how do I develop oracy from my particular subject? If your school are wanting to increase the rates of attendance, you'll be thinking, what does my subject, how can my subject play into that? Is it that I'm thinking about exciting visits and visitors that have children coming in every day? Whatever it is. So you're thinking about your whole school picture, you go through the SDP and you work out where your subject links in. Specifically, having taken those particular points, you turn those things into your own action plan. About 15 slides onwards, I've got some examples of action plans, so we'll get into that bit in more detail then. You will have, depending on the subject you're leading, and if you're a new middle leader, you probably don't have English or maths, although you might do. You'll have little to no release time, is what I'm saying. So therefore, you need to use any time you do get in the school day for things that you can only accomplish there and then. When the children are in the building, that's your chance to talk to them. If you're able, you can ask your leadership team, I really need to be out of class on next week, Wednesday at 2 o'clock, because I want to have a look at the year 5 science lesson, and that's when it's happening. So you might be able to ask specifically for time, but you might also be able to talk to children. Have I got it here? Hang on, I've gone off task slightly. Let me flick back. So you might also be able to talk to children, break times, lunch times, as you're walking through school, etc. What I would always do when I was leading is I would have an overarching thing I wanted to know about for that half term. So if I go back to the space retrieval example, if I knew that I wanted to know how well children were retaining their knowledge in science for that half term, anytime I saw them, if I walked through the corridor and there was a child out of class who was going to the toilet, I'd ask them, what are you doing? What are you learning at the moment? What can you remember about that? What did you do last week? A brief thing, you don't want them out of class for too long. But if I always knew the key focus, if I was on playground duty, I'd be asking them, what have you been learning in class today? How did that link to what you did last week? How is that going to help you with what you're doing next week? Whatever it is. So it's about finding ways of using that time really wisely. I used to also do a thing, this isn't in the slides, but I used to also do a thing where I'd say periodically say to teachers, can you leave your science books out and open? Because as on my way down to the staff room to get my lunch, I want to have a quick whiz through and see how children are getting on in a given unit. So I didn't have a dedicated release time. I'd do a different year group on different days, or different classes on different days. But it would just give me a snapshot, an ongoing information gathering then, if you want, where I didn't have specific time out of class. But let me get back to the slides. So use the school day for things that you can only get done then and there. So you can't talk to pupils when they're not there, and you can't see lessons when children are not there. So that's your focus for the actual school day. And then once the day is finished, you can write up reports. You can do like a planning scrutiny, or a book scrutiny, or you can talk to teachers, or whatever it is, or whatever else is happening, you can do that outside of the actual school day. And the last thing then is about the staff room. So typically we're there. I would always be talking about things that have gone wrong, typically in my lessons. I'd be saying, oh gosh, this child had said, whatever it is. That's your opportunity in the staff room to be finding out how teachers are getting on with your particular subject. You can ask them, how is it going in history this week? How are those resources going? Did the children get a lot out of the visitor that they had in? Or whatever it is, just showing that genuine curiosity. Of course, your time in the staff room is about unwinding, letting go, letting the pressures of the day go, all of those things. But it's also about being really wise with that, because I would always find that teachers who felt empowered to teach their lessons, had the resources they need, were generally happier. So it feeds into well-being as well, if you can use the staff room in that particular way. So a summary then of all of those things, try and be the example. So if you are the history lead, teachers in your school are looking at you as the example of what history should look like in the school. So you need to be that example. You want to either signpost teachers to your books, your display, your outcomes, your whatever it is. You got to be that example. It doesn't mean be the expert at history, but it does mean that whatever you're asking for history in your school, you are the example of that. You probably trial things in your own year group or your own class before you ask other teachers in school to do it. The next point here about have a focus, this is where I was talking, I said I'd ask children on playground duty, in the canteen, wherever it is, whatever my particular line of inquiry is, that was my question at all times for everybody. So I'd lead with that intention in place. So yeah, leading from your classroom. Now, having done all of that kind of information gathering, you're going to have identified some CPD needs, and they're typically going to be things that you want to celebrate, but more largely than that, they're going to be the next steps for your particular subject. So when you're thinking then about that CPD, you bring it back to the vision for your subject. So what does excellence in science look like in your school? What does excellence in history look like in your school? Or what would you want it to look like? Where is your school up to, and what are the next steps for them? So in terms of your CPD, it's important that it starts with you. And I haven't said your subject, it's literally you. It's the importance of you understanding where you are on your leadership journey, what leadership should feel like. Honestly, I think I cried for the first year of being phase leader. I probably shouldn't say that here, but I did. I just felt as if I couldn't find the balance between my classroom and the subject that I was leading. And once I came to terms with me as a leader, it was far easier for me to wear those two particular hats. So your CPD for yourself is very important in terms of your own leadership style. Networking and collaborating is really, really crucial. If you're in a trust, it might be easier for you. If you're not, but your consortium have history networks, science networks, whatever it is really worth joining them. And if they don't exist, ask about them. You will find that to be really, really supportive. Then we're thinking CPD for the subject. So do find your subject association. The second to last slide in my deck has links to the subject association. So you can click on those and find your subject associations there. It's important to be as well informed and widely read for your subject as possible. Even if you haven't had time to dig really deeply into the specific concepts, you want to know an overview about things that are happening in your subject right now that you can signpost your colleagues to. And it might be that you're listening to podcasts, you're attending webinars, subject-specific webinars, listening to audiobooks. We've got all kinds of information on the hub that might be a really useful starting place for you. You're also going to be thinking then about the CPD needs for the staff. And this is the bit that will have been informed by conversations with children, learning walks through school, planning, monitoring, book scrutiny, whatever it is. So you're going to be thinking about your whole school needs. You and all the subject leads will be asking your leadership team for time, and your leadership team will be saying, well, these are the priorities this year. You've got to be mindful about where your subject fits in, but also really specific about exactly why you need that subject development and what you're going to be doing about it. You're likely to be the one who is leading that CPD. So potentially you go off and do a training, something that is external to school, and then you bring it back into school and you deliver it with your staff team. So on that note then, whatever you go and do externally, you've watched webinars, you've listened to podcasts, audiobooks, you've been on courses, whatever it is, the important thing is that you apply that learning to your actual classroom. Do it in your own classroom first, and then start thinking about how that translates wider in your school. And I've got this bit in red here that teaching is the work. So sometimes I ask teachers or subject leads about the training and development that they've had, and they say, I haven't had any. Your day-to-day teaching is your subject development, even if your every Monday the staff meeting covers whatever it is, SEND, adaptive teaching, writing, history, whatever. What you're doing in your classroom on a moment-to-moment basis, that is the work, that is your CPD. If you've listened to something about space retrieval and you do or you forget to use some of those approaches, that's your feedback loop right there. So we're thinking about how easy is it to use whatever the CPD is on a day-to-day basis. The things that don't work for you probably won't work in your school. So the things that don't work are as important as the things that do work. Mindset. Okay, so when we're thinking about the CPD that you're going to share in school, there are going to be things that work really well for you that you choose to share wider. Even then, there are going to be teachers who struggle to make it work and teachers who make it look really, really easy. So thinking back to when I said you and your development as a leader is really important, your mindset is really important. You'll make mistakes. You'll need a level of resilience and an ability to bounce back. Okay, so what do I mean by this? One of the first things I did when I was a new subject lead all the way back in the day, I had so I had global dimensions, and then I had languages, and I didn't do much with them. But then I had science. And so the first thing I did with science is I'd inherited this approach. We were doing science week. And I just didn't think that science week was being done in the school very well. So I had this great idea. We were going to do a science day. We were going to turn every classroom in school into a science lab, and the children were going to visit 4 different classrooms across the day. So the 4 main sessions across the day, and they were going to do 4 different experiments, and then they were going to write them up and present them in assembly, and it was going to be all bells on and amazing and all of this stuff. And honestly, the first year it was, I was going to say awful. I mean, it wasn't great. It wasn't great at all. I really had to dig deep to find my way through this failure, in inverted comments. Have a think about what went wrong, where was the communication issues, what is it that I did or didn't say to staff, and all of those things. More important than the actual day was all of the learning that came out of how to lead a new initiative in school, knowing which teachers were going to struggle, which teachers were going to say they were fine with it, but they actually weren't. And I needed to go and dig deeper and put some support in place for them. And also knowing which teachers were going to be the ones who could lead it for their year group. So every time I say for year groups, I was working in a 4th elementary school. So it was a big staff team. So yeah, so we're thinking mindset. So there'll be mistakes, there'll be things that don't work for you in the moment. Bigger than the actual mistake is what you do about it and how you move forward, how you identify where your learning points are and what you do about them next time. There's a big focus there on mistakes. Even when things go well, you still want to take a little bit of time to stop and think, what's gone well here? Why has that gone well? And how do I replicate that wider than this particular event that I've just had? Then it says here about laggards and champions. So I just wanted to put this out there. Where your energy goes, that's where your attention is. So if you've got people in your team who are laggards, there are the ones who they've always got a reason why something won't work. We've tried this before. I've tried this before. It doesn't work for me, for the children, for the school, whatever it is. And then you'll have champions, always excited about a new initiative. Yes, I can't wait to try this out. It's going to be amazing. There'll be both in every school, some of those voices louder or quieter or however it goes. But for you as the subject lead, my advice to you is put your attention on the champions. Find those staff members who are really excited and positive and proactive about whatever it is that's happening in school. Find those supporters and focus on them. Where you've got your reticent staff members, and you might not have very many of them, and they might be quiet about it, but you almost want to just kind of leave them for a while to get on with it. When I talk about asking for help, I'll talk about what to do with those particular people, but find your supporters and focus on them. That's going to be really important from your energy point of view. And there will be a critical mass. So I'm typically thinking about new initiatives where the science one, for example, most teachers were not keen on turning their classroom into a science investigation. However, having said, there'll be a critical mass. So there'll be a particular number in your school of teachers for whom, once they get on board with whatever it is you're doing, everybody else, almost by osmosis, just kind of get on board as well. I've put there the 100th monkey only because I really like this theory. I know that it has been to a certain extent debunked, but the idea is that once you've got a given number of people doing the same thing, almost magically, almost by shared consciousness, everybody else just kind of starts doing it. If you're all talking excitedly about science, suddenly even the least interested teachers are also talking excitedly about science. If you're interested in this whole thing around the 100th monkey, ask me in the break and I'll tell you all about it in a bit more detail. And overall, so this, and I'm not sure actually if this phrase is specific for this webinar, but it's a thing that gets me through every aspect of my life, including leadership and including work. Everything will be all right when you're all right with everything. So it's any time that I have to deal with things that I'm unsure about, difficult conversation, I have to give feedback about an observation that didn't go as well as it might have done, have to speak to a parent, whatever it is. When I understand that if I'm all right with it, it will be fine. What I mean by that is it's not Nadine that has to deal with these things. It is currently my role is consortium partner. So it's consortium partner has to give this feedback, or it might be subject lead has to give this feedback, assistant head has to give this feedback, phase leader, class teacher, whatever it is. So as soon as you can depersonalize it and be able to remove yourself personally from the role that you're doing, you will find it that much easier to deliver your role. If things are going well, it is still the role that is going well. It's still not you. Either way, the long way of saying, everything will feel fine when you're fine about it. Okay, systems. So I'm a big fan of systems in terms of being able to move things forward, both in school and any other aspects of my life. So always have a system and be really clear about how your system works, who should use it, when they should use it, what they should do if things go wrong. So have a system, test the system. So come in one day and try and use your system, whatever it is, tweak your system and then test the system. I'm jumping on because I want to give some examples to set this in context. So let's say, for example, you've got a system for using resources. It might be that there's a particular way that staff can check and access resources for your subject, order more, maintain them, put them away, whatever it is. You might have a system for how staff use and engage with the planning in your school. You might have spent some time creating really clear long-term plans and medium-term plans. Perhaps the system is that teachers take the medium-term plan, they turn it into their weekly or their daily plans. If they need to make changes, they come and speak with you as the curriculum lead before they make changes and you agree them, whatever it is. You'll have a process for all of the aspects of your leadership. So once you've got your process, as I said, test the system. So it might be that you decide you want to go and check how many paintbrushes you've got because you're doing a session on watercolor, or it might be that you want to know whether or not teachers are, it's week 2 of the second half term in spring. You want to know whether teachers are teaching the right part of your subject curriculum. So you have a look at their planning, or you have a look at their books, or you see their children in the playground and you say to them, how is it going? How tell me all about the children in the Victorian era. And children go, what do you mean? We're still learning all about the Vikings. I made that up. I don't know what's on your medium-term plans, but test the system. Find out whether or not teachers and children in your school are using your system. If they're not using it, you got to tweak that system. It's either they don't know what the system is, then your tweak might be that you clarify for them and you restate what it is they need to be doing and why. It might be that the system doesn't work for your school. So maybe you're saying you need teachers to tell you at the beginning of a half term what resourcing they need for the next half term so that you can get it ready. Or they've done their plan for the half term and then there was an attendance celebration day, or there was an unplanned closure, water pipes burst and school had to close and nobody got to deliver week 2 sessions, so it all has to move further forward or whatever it is. You've got to be able to understand what the barriers are in school and then put contingencies in place. So you might, for example, think, okay, I'm planning for 6-week units with some space then for teachers to revisit learning that wasn't consolidated, or to put an exploration day in there. Then you hit a half term like this one. There's only 5 weeks, not 6 weeks. We're going to have to take something out. What is your least impactful thing to take out? Does it need to roll into spring? Sorry, does it need to roll into summer 1? Let me just pause there and just say, whatever your system is, be really clear about how your systems work in your subject. Share that with your staff team. Try them out. If it doesn't work, make changes and then test your systems again. You really want to, especially when you won't have much release time, really want to know that the systems that are in place for teachers delivering your lessons work in your school. And if they don't work, you need the opportunity to do something about that. If this was a live session, I'd probably right now be asking if that works, or if there are any questions, but I know we're going to do questions in the break, which will be in about 15 minutes. Okay, so I've already said know the system, use the system. Now, when I talk about reporting up and down, one of the most difficult things about subject leadership, which used to be largely called middle leadership, is the fact that you have to report in both directions, both up and down. You need to be able to give assurance to your leaders more senior than you about what's happening with your subject. And it might be changes to curriculum, update to resources, attainment, outcome, whatever. But you need to also be able to give information downwards to the teachers who are delivering your subject. You will be both the lead, the protagonist for your subject, but an extra as far as rest of school is concerned. But then you'll also be an extra as far as all the other subjects are concerned, and somebody else will be the protagonist for their subject. I just literally slipped into a writing analogy. Apologies. But yeah, you need to be able to understand that you're both, the information about your system goes both up and down. So you're saying to leadership, these things work really well. I know my subject is working because, and you need to be able to say to the rest of the staff, these things are working really well. You are doing well because, and you're very clear about why. And the language might be different. We'll get into that when I talk about reporting. So I'm going to briefly then talk about reticent staff. I touched on it when I talked about laggards and champions around new initiatives. Sometimes you'll have reticent staff and they'll be quiet because they are just getting on with it and they're fine. Or they'll be quiet because they are not getting on with it and they're trying not to get found out, in inverted commas. So you need to know which of those two things is happening with your subject. If you've got staff who are quietly ignoring the initiatives that you've got running in school, your first port of call is to go and have, no, I take that back. Your very first port of call is a generic reminder to your entire staff team before you go and speak to any individual teacher. A generic reminder to the entire staff team, don't forget, we're all thinking about space retrieval in science. And when I am walking around school, going on break, when I'm talking to your children, when I'm walking through your lessons, I'm going to be looking out for evidence that you are using space retrieval in science. So you've done that reminder for everybody. You know who you're really talking to, but you've done the reminder for everybody. Having done the reminder, you know that you've still got staff who are not doing it. At that point, then, you want to go and have a conversation with those particular staff members. And you want to approach that conversation from the point of view of, I have been looking at space retrieval across school. I've noticed that it's not as consistent in your classroom as in other classrooms. Is there anything that I can do to support or help you with that? And you're going in with the assumption that they are keen to do it, but for whatever reason haven't been able to do it. And you kind of judge the conversation from there. Some of them will be really open and tell you exactly what's going on. Others will not, and you might need to use your school's accountability system. When you've had that conversation, that's a really good time to speak to your line manager or speak to a member of your leadership team. That conversation is just going to be almost just a information sharing. I'm a little bit concerned about what's happening in the year 3 classroom, for example, because I've asked Nadine several times to use the spaced retrieval in science. And every time I look in her books or talk to her children or walk through her classroom, I've noticed that it isn't happening. Is there anything else that I need to know about what's happening for Nadine? And your leadership team will either say, yes, but don't worry about it. We're dealing with it because it's part of a bigger thing that's happening for that teacher. Or they'll say, no, but do you want me to join you for a conversation? You'll be able to work out that way forward. But as an absolute first port of call, generic message to the entire staff, and then you go and meet with them specifically, and you're assuming that you have got things, you've got messages that you haven't communicated. You're assuming that they want to do what you're asking for, but you haven't enabled them. If it turns out otherwise, as I said, you talk to your leadership team. And the bit there, it says the jigsaw of information. What I mean here, a little bit like safeguarding. Your senior leadership team will have a lot of information about all of the staff in the school. So you coming along and saying, Nadine isn't following procedures with science might feed into a bigger picture that they've got about Nadine, and might indicate that she needs more support, or might indicate that where she's doing really well in all these other areas, there is a particular area that needs focus as well. So do what you can, and then you speak to your leadership team and be guided by them. They will say to you, keep going. There's no reason why Nadine shouldn't get on board with that. Or they might say, okay, leave that alone. I'm dealing with some things, and I will include that as far as developing Nadine. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so the leadership report. So I talked about knowing what you should or shouldn't include. Now, in some schools, you're not asked for a report on your area, and in some schools you are. So please just take this with a pinch of salt. If in your particular school you are asked for a report on your area, this section applies to you. If not, store the information, because at some point you will be asked for a report. Either you'll change subjects or you'll change schools, and there will be a requirement for a report in your subject. So the first thing then is the head teacher will be wanting an update in terms of the school development plan. So they will want to know their bigger picture of developing oracy, improving attendance, developing or raising standards in writing, or whatever it is. How is the school going as far as that bigger picture target? So your report needs to be talking about how your subject has impacted the priorities for the SDP. How has having a great visitor for history improved attendance for school? How has Having a great visitor for history improved children's use of oracy or vocabulary or reading or critical thinking or whatever it is. So that's the first thing you want your report to do. Use the same language that your head teacher is using in the SDP. So if it says raise attainment, say raise attainment. Don't say improve progress. Those two things are actually different. So use the language and use the section headings. If they're saying part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4, use that particular language. Include information around what still needs to be actioned or evaluated. So you'll know, obviously it's spring, we're kind of halfway through the year now, or it's beginning of spring too. There will be things on your action plan that you haven't done yet. That is absolutely fine. You're not supposed to have done, but do include in your report planned steps for the remainder of the year or things that are going to be rolled into next year. Your head teacher is also going to be thinking about how your subject feeds into the SEF, the school evaluation form. They, in an ideal world, could just take your subject report and use that to feed into the SEF. They might need to have a specific conversation with you. They might want you to create just one annual report, overall report at the end of the year that evaluates what you were trying to do, what you have achieved, what the limitations have been, and how you plan to build on that next year. You might also include just some really embryonic ideas for future development. So they won't be fleshed out. They won't have information attached. It just might be, it'll be really interesting to have a think about the use of speaking frames in PE, for example, one of my favorite things to talk about. Okay, so then when I'm thinking then about what to have in and what to have out, what to have in. So depending on the audience is going to depend on what you put in there. If your report is going to be shared with governors, if it's a report for governors, it needs strategic information only. If governors have strategic oversight of school, they don't need the operational detail about how you are carrying out those actions, which classrooms and year groups need more support or have done fantastically well. They need overarching strategic information. If your report is just for your senior leaders, they will probably want both strategic and operational information included. So be really clear about who the audience is for your report. If the report is going to staff team, and typically I wouldn't write a prose, I wouldn't write a whole report for staff team, but it might be headlines. I would keep that really evaluative. So what's working really well and what do staff need to focus on next, and just keep it to those, maybe 3 in each of those, what's working well and even better ifs. And then regardless of who the audience is for, you want there to be headlines, the main things that are happening in your subject, and then focus it on successes. Talk about all the elements of your subject development that are working really well. And your successes might be the number of teachers who have put into practice the CPD that you've had in school, or the number of classes where attainment has jumped a certain amount. It might be children's pupil voice. It might be the number of children who are telling you that they feel more confident in your subject or enjoy your subject, or have used your subject to help them do something else outside of school. And then you want something in there about adaptations and consolidations. Notice I haven't said to have a specific thing around areas that are not going well. I've called it adaptations or consolidations. We're thinking about, where do I need to make some changes, or what do I need to do more of to boost that particular outcome? So that's what goes into your report. Now, when I talk about operational or strategic, I can't see the chat function, so I'm not going to do the thing I was going to do, but I'm going to go through quite a few statements, And then on the next slide, I'm going to go and show you whether or not they were operational or strategic. So we've got here update on your subject or department's overall progress, just in your mind, or maybe on a bit of paper. Just note down, do you think that's operational or strategic? I'm not going to check your homework, nobody else is, but please do engage with it, because I really want you to get your head around the difference between operational information and strategic information. So update on the subject's overall progress, do you think that's operational or strategic? An account on how the subject is leading or supporting the school performance and progress. How leaders use, leaders using their relevant professional experience to decide where amendments or improvements can be made. So this is making decisions about how to change or improve practice in school. Is that strategic or operational? And then an update on progress being made, including any data that has been asked for. So I've underlined asked for. I'll talk about that on the next slide. But so that progress would help leaders scrutinize the school's work effectively and check the plan is being implemented properly. Would that activity count as operational or strategic? And then if the department isn't making progress, okay, this gives you a bit of a clue. Governors can ask the leadership team to review the improvement plan and take steps to amend it. If you were paying attention a couple of slides ago, I told you that governors are strategic only. So the idea that there are governors asking SLT what to do might give you a clue about whether number 5 is strategic or operational. Leaders should report to the full board or the most relevant committee on a regular basis. So is that activity of reporting to board regularly or not? Is that strategic or operational? I think it's more just like information, actually. Not necessarily you, but your school leaders will be reporting on your subject fairly regularly to governors. Okay, review the precise details of the plan and monitor it day to day to make sure the subject or department is making progress. Is that operational or strategic? I think this is the last one. The subject lead or the head of department might want to present an overview of the plan to governors so they can be satisfied that a strategic plan is in place. So of those things, as I said, we're not going to use the chat function, but I hope you've noted down which of those things you thought were operational or strategic, because, here we go. I'm going to whiz through them really quickly. Okay, so all of these things are strategic, so need to be included in your report. So an update on the overall progress, an account for how your subject is supporting school progress and performance, an update on data that you've been asked for. And the reason I underlined that is because from a strategic point of view, you don't need everything. Governors, your head teacher, etc., they just want the overall numbers. They might only want outcomes for year 2 and year 6. They might only want a group figure for children who are working at the expectation and above. So they might not want a breakdown for greater depth or working towards or whatever it is. So be really mindful about what you've been asked for. If they want to know about specific groups, give them that information. If they want to know about SEND, give them that specific information. If they don't ask for specific data, then just give them overall subject headlines, which would just be the number of children that are meeting your subject expectation or not, and leave it at that. So be really clear about what you are being asked for. So the fourth one there, if the department isn't making progress, governors can ask the leadership to review the plan and take steps to amend it. Obviously, that's strategic. The governors are not going to actually get involved in what is in the improvement plan and what to do about it, what's in your action plan. But they might just say, can you have a look at this? And that would fall under the operational bit. And then, yeah, your leaders will be reporting on a regular basis. So the operational bits then, as a leader, you would review the precise details of your plan. So even though you're not being asked for data about groups, for example, or send, high prior retainers, low prior retainers, or whatever it is, you would have that really precise information about the data and progress for your subject. You would have really precise information about what you've done on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis in terms of moving your subject forward. Don't put that in a report for anybody. It's yours. You might use it. Performance management, for example, might be one of the few occasions that you need that kind of information. You will be, and your leadership team will be using your professional experience to make decisions about amendments or improvements to your plan moving forward. And you might be asked to put together an overview of the plan. So the process of putting together an overview of your plan is operational. The actual overview that you put together is going to be strategic headlines, main points only. Definitely don't use jargon. Okay, so lots of governors are not education based. They don't know what that means. And even if they are, the subject specific jargon varies from subject to subject, and across our 11 or 12 subjects at primary, there are very few leaders who know all the jargon across all of the different subject areas. Keep it really, really accessible so that anybody would be able to read it. Don't put lots of detail. Typically, the audience for your report are generally, they're quite time poor. They've got lots of reports to read and lots of other things that they're trying to do. They're going to skim over your report anyway, is the likely scenario. They won't read it all. They're looking for your headlines. They don't want to know what you've found out from every single book look. They might just want to know that overall books show that the curriculum is being delivered in line with the long-term plans and that children are closing gaps in learning. And don't put your embryonic ideas in a leadership report. Save them for either talking to your head teacher about the school evaluation form or your performance management. So hopefully that helps you. Okay, very quick word on assessment. I think I've got 2 or 3 slides here. But the first one, this one, test what has been taught. Don't teach what will be tested. So you'll have put together, there'll be a long-term plan, there'll be a medium-term plan, and your teachers will be designing their lessons from there. The assessment of that, and it might be that there are quizzes, there might be an end of unit activity, children might have to do a presentation, a report, a debate, whatever it is going to be based around what the curriculum was supposed to have covered. But if, for example, an element of your curriculum hasn't been delivered for whatever reason, the test at the end is going to have to reflect that. So children are not going to be able to do well on talking about the experiences of the Victorian children if they haven't covered it. So you need to know what it is that your curriculum is testing. And I hope that I've put it on this page. I have. The results that you get are supposed to tell you about how well the curriculum is doing in your school. It is not as much about how well individual children are doing. Now, this is often something that teachers and leaders ask me, what do you mean? How on earth can a test not tell us how an individual child has done? And so what I mean is that the children just are the children. We can't change them. What we do have control of is the quality of the curriculum in school. You don't have control over the attention span of Nadine. I was often looking out the window or whatever it was. It didn't matter how good my teacher was. I was either engaged or not in that session, and it wasn't, the measure of me wouldn't be as helpful for the school. They wouldn't want to start saying, oh, well, we need to change our history curriculum because Nadine's looking out the window. However, if half the class don't do very well on that particular assessment, they might want to be thinking about the effectiveness of the history curriculum. It might be boring. Let me just stop there. Okay, so we're thinking then about the effectiveness of the curriculum, not the ability of the children. So the assessments that you do will be giving you information about how well the curriculum has been taught. If children don't do, if the majority of children or a significant number of children do not do very well on a given assessment in your subject, it's going to be indicative of how well that curriculum has been taught to the children. And that might be a development point. It might be that you need more CPD around the specific pedagogy in your subject, and how spaced retrieval in science might be different to spaced retrieval in PE or music or history or whatever it is. So it's going to give you information about how well the curriculum has been taught. It's going to give you information about which parts of the curriculum have been taught well. So the things that children do well on, that bit of the curriculum was taught well. That's a consolidation point, that's a success for your subject, all of those things. It's also going to tell you what has been taught well to whom. So if, for example, boys do better on an aspect than girls, it might be that the pedagogy suited boys better, or the content suited them better, or whatever it is. It might be that the content didn't spark girls, or it didn't hit their prior learning, or whatever it is. So the test results are giving you information around what has been taught well and to which children. And if you've got groups, maybe you've got high mobility, so you've got new to school group, then you know that those children have not covered the entirety of the curriculum. But you might have, I don't know, I was going to start plucking groups. So we had quite a high Polish community in the last school I taught in London. So they would typically do well on some aspects and not other aspects. And that just became us knowing as a school, there's a set of prior learning that we need to cover that enables every child in the class to achieve in this given subject. The test results then are also going to be talking about what hasn't been taught well. So the idea that some children don't achieve something very well, obviously we can't discount an individual child. It might be that that child has got gaps in their learning, is at an embryonic stage of learning to read or write or whatever it like, there'll be specific interventions. But where you've got a significant number of children not doing well on something, you need to then start thinking, what factors have contributed to this? Is there an element of year 3 curriculum that is crucial for securing this thing in year 5? And was it covered very well for that particular cohort? So you've got like some deeper digging to be done. And that links to the idea about retention of foundational content. So if they've covered things in key stage 1 and in early years, and they needed this understanding of place value, for example, that by the time they get to year 5, they're cooking something and they struggle to scale the recipes up because their understanding of place value means that they can't scale up using their multiplication. So I've gone really detailed here. But anyway, so what's been taught well, what hasn't been taught well, and what might you do about it? So we're moving away from the idea that we've got a group of children who struggle to learn, and we're moving into the idea that we're measuring the quality of our curriculum, and where we have underperformance is nothing to do with a given cohort. We are thinking, how well has the curriculum prepared these children for the task ahead of them? And if they haven't done well, the curriculum hasn't. It might be that they didn't cover it. It was in remote provision. It was COVID. You've got quite high persistent absence in a year group. So they've not been there when the rest of the class have been there. There'll be information, but it's up to you to find it out. Yes, I think I've labored that point, but your test results then are giving you information about the curriculum, not the specific children. I guess the exception to that would be, for example, in a one-form entry school where you've got really specific cohort needs, and you'll know that you've got 10% persistent absence, and you've also got, funnily enough, the same 10% of children not doing very well on given assessments. In that case, then it's the fact that the children haven't been there. It's not that the curriculum isn't working well, it's the particular children. So there'll be caveats to that rule, but largely speaking, the assessments are telling you about how effective your curriculum is, not about how able the children are in the school. So I want to just quickly, along those lines of thinking about how effective the curriculum is, typically as teachers, and especially as early to post subject leads, we're thinking about measuring the teaching and learning. So we'll be thinking questions like, is something working? Should I do this approach or that approach? Did it improve learning? And those things are fine, but it isn't going to answer your next steps moving forward. So rather than thinking, is this working? Should I do this or that? How do I know that this thing is working? And that comes back to the data on the previous page. I know the curriculum is working because 3 years in a row, year 5 children have been able to meet the curricular expectation. So nothing to do with a given cohort. We know that year on year, children are able to meet the expectation in a given year group. Good, the curriculum is working. So that's how do I know? Or that's not happening. And I know that the curriculum is not working because I've got this yo-yo thing happening with outcomes in a given year group. So rather than should I do this or that, be thinking, how do I compare those two? How would I know which of these two approaches are going to yield the outcome that I want? So we're looking at evaluating rather than measuring your curriculum. Rather than did it improve merit, did it improve merit? Rather than did it improve learning, what is the merit of this approach on learners? So what we mean here is that helpful to learners? Does that work for an inner city community compared to a more suburban community? I just can't think at the moment, words are failing me. And then there's several other things here. So what's the size of the effect? The reason why it's going to be several more things at this side is because with the work of Dylan William and Shirley Clark, and another name that has failed me, but will come back to me in a minute, they were saying that pretty much anything you do will improve learning. So we're not really saying, has it improved learning? Just by mere fact that children are in the classroom, some of them will learn, they just will happen. So we're thinking then, how big is that effect size? Not was there an effect size? How big is that effect size? What is the merit on learning? Is there evidence that would make you think you're wrong about something? So you might have children practicing different aspects of using vocabulary, for example. Is there anything, what would you look for that tells you that this approach is not working? Often we're looking for saying, well, 2 more children use this particular word in their writing or in their RE presentation or whatever it is. But have you thought about how you'll know that something is not working? What evidence would you be looking for with that? Is there evidence that shows one thing is definitely better than something else? Have you seen a particular approach used somewhere so that it yields effective results? Now, just because something works in one classroom doesn't automatically mean it will work in another classroom, or just because it works in one school doesn't automatically mean it will work in another school. But if you've at least seen it work, that's the beginning of a conversation around why does it work and what is it that I can do in my classroom that replicates that effect. And is there a common conception of progress in school? So are we saying that one extra mark is progress, or are we saying that we need to make at least 10 points to call that progress? What is it? What are we saying is progress in school? Is it statistical? Are we talking standard deviations? I mean, I like data. I'm not going to get into that point, but do we have a common understanding about what we're calling progress? And even if something is working, how can I do it better? What am I not doing very well? And what evidence can I collect? Okay, so just looking at the time. and I'll do this slide and then we'll go to a break and then we'll pick up on the send bit afterwards. So the why of your subject is more important than the what it is that you're doing. So what I mean by this is your governors and the head teacher will have a vision for what they want the school to be able to offer and provide for the community that it serves. So take their vision, turn it into how your subject feeds into that vision. What is it? What does excellence in PE look like? What does excellence in PSHE look like? So we've got the bigger picture of the vision. This is why you want that subject to do well. So you want children maybe to develop their critical thinking muscle, because we know that as they move into key stage 3 and beyond, they're going to increasingly be picking up information from peers, from the internet, fake news, all of that stuff. And you want them to really understand how they know that something is reliable or not, or whatever. I've not been very clear there, but you've got your vision. Now, if the particular approaches that you're using to develop critical thinking are not working for your particular cohort, you know that you can change the approach without changing the outcome. We still want children to develop critical thinking, but a particular approach isn't working for them. Therefore, we're going to be able to change the approach without changing the outcome, the thing that we're trying to achieve. So it's really important to have that why and have that outcome in there. And then I've just got that phrase there, the obstacle is the path. So things will go well or not. And it isn't that there is a problem. The obstacle is part of what you do. It's not that we've got to try and get round it. The obstacle is there and it is part of your approach. So you welcome it. There's supposed to be children who are consistently late to school, are absent, are, you know, whatever, high achievers, always listening, always asking the right relevant question. Whatever that obstacle is, it's part of your path. It's not a thing that you have to wish was not there or try and get round. There will always be an obstacle. So you almost want to welcome that obstacle, and you work out how you're going to approach that. And then what you've got are your mitigations for the following year or the following few years. When that doesn't work, here's what we do next. Okay, so it is just past 22 as far as my time is going. So I'm going to pause here for a break. Let's just say 10 minutes. Can we come back? Let me stop sharing so I can be precise about the time. Claire, I can see that you put your mic on. Thank you. So I've got 2:42 on my laptop. If we could come back then at 2:52, a quite precise 10 minutes, and then we'll pick up and do send in your subject and then the rest of it. In fact, 53, because I can see I've spoken for an extra minute. Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's bang on 2:53. I'm going to carry on. It is recorded, so if you're not back yet, I know the kettle does take a while to boil. Okay, so let's get the screen back up again. Okay, thanks for coming back. So we finished on the why is more important than the what in subject leadership. So send and your subject. Now, I sat in, I think it was yesterday's webinar, and some things occurred to me around send. So just a few headlines in terms of send pupils and your subject. So do you know how well send pupils are doing in your subject? And it's always worth knowing that information. Now, at the point of the point of curriculum delivery, as in the classroom experience for the SEND learners, that's more important than anything else. How robust is that experience for SEND pupils? So is pedagogy adaptive? are teachers including those particular SEND children in your particular subject? So inclusion in science, for example, might look different to inclusion in PE or history or music or whatever it is. What is it about your subject that enables children, all children, to be able to engage and do well? So how, and that's what I talked about here. So also, how do the specifics of any particular support plan or EHCP translate in your subject? So if children, if a plan, for example, says that children need additional brain breaks, for example, they need specific amounts of time with a known stop period. What does that look like? If you're the science lead and you know that the children are doing working scientifically and they're doing an experiment or an investigation or whatever it is, how do you expect teachers to incorporate elements of a brain break when they're in the middle of doing science investigation? Is that possible? Will you have an additional child in the group who's going to catch them up when they come back? Whatever it is, you do just need to have thought, how do the specifics of a support plan or an EHCP translate into the needs of my particular subject? And you'll need to be on hand and available. You'll need to liaise both with the SENCO in the school and the class teacher to help them to personalize. This is what it looks like in science. This is what it looks like in English. This is what it looks like in PE, and so on. So have a think about that. And then I talked about the expectations for inclusion and engagement. If you've got children who, the brain break is a great one. You know, how do we incorporate that? You've got the whole class are outside in PE and they're just with the classroom teacher. I mean, you know, what are going to be the logistics of inclusion in your particular subject? Similarly, it might be, you know, like a classroom bound session like RE or history or whatever else. And finally, I think I took this question just from the end of a Chris Pollitt webinar, and he was basically saying, if the curriculum is really good, why aren't SEND pupils doing better? And that wasn't to say that SEND pupils were not doing well, but it was always on the lens of better is possible. So if the curriculum is really good, why aren't the SEND children doing better than they are? And generally in most schools, SEND children don't do as well as other children. But if you can show that they are making progress from their starting points, accelerated progress where possible, or at least meeting the expectations of their support plans, you're rocking on gas, you're cooking on gas at that point. Okay, so having done all of that, then I was going to break at that point. We're going to now spend a bit of time, probably most of this bit of the session, thinking about your subject and inspection, and whether or not your school is due for inspection, whether or not your subject is likely going to have a deep dive or not. It's worth knowing overall what the expectations might be. So any next inspection is going to start with the recommendations from the last inspection. So know what that is. And just like you've done with the SDP, work out whether there is anything in the recommendation that can be accessed in your subject or that can be evidenced in your subject. Often reports that are coming out post 2020 will say things like foundation subjects. Reports that were before 2020 might specifically say in history this needs to happen, or in maths this needs to happen. They don't really name specific subjects moving forward. But anyway, yeah, so the inspection will start with the recommendations from the last. So make sure that you know what they are. You'll have likely seen this overview before, taken from one of the Ofsted webinars, but generally the inspection will start with a conversation with senior leaders. That will then move into a conversation with you as the subject lead. It will also include looking at lessons, looking at work, talking to children, talking to teachers, and then inspectors bring all of that together. So a bulk of inspection activity will be with subjects, with subject leads and with the teachers and the children. So with that in mind, what exactly does it look like? What will they be looking for? I have updated these paragraph numbers, by the way. So as of today, actually as of yesterday, these paragraph numbers are accurate. If Ofsted put an update to the framework out that is newer than the 24th of January, the paragraph numbers won't correlate. So if you're watching this on the replay, just be mindful about whether there is an up-to-date framework. So when they're evaluating the quality of education, be thinking paragraph 235, they will want to have a think about the knowledge and skills that pupils gain at each stage in the school's curriculum. So this is your long-term plan. This is overall by the end of early years, by the end of Key Stage 1, by the end of Key Stage 2. Okay, so those are the stages, and they call that the intent. What is it that you want a child to be able to do by the end of Key Stage 1, by the time they are 6 or 7? They will have a look at the scope of the curriculum. So they'll be thinking about how carefully does your curriculum build towards those specific endpoints. So if you want children to, for example, to be writing coherent sentences using some subordination and using coordination. So, you know, year 2 teachers will know that's on the teacher assessment framework for year 2. How is that built in? So are children expected to write a sentence by the end of early years? And what does that look like? Are they expected to start using and in year 1? And what does that look like? If they're not on track, what happens because of that? So at the moment, intent is big picture. Do you know the main milestones that children need to meet at the end of each stage? And does the curriculum build towards those things? They'll also have a look at how content has been broken down. So when they say components, what they mean are the, let me make sure I get this right. So the composites and components. When they say components, they mean the individual small steps, okay? Composite means bringing everything together, so the end point, but that endpoint I talked about for year 2, for example, writing incoherent sentences with subordination, with coordination and some subordination, that's a composite. That's a bigger picture combination. What are the smaller steps? Smaller steps might be that they know what a sentence is, might be that they understand subject, object, verb. They might not use that language, but they understand that there's a thing or person that the sentence is about. There's an object, there's a thing that the subject is interacting with, and then there's a verb, there's an action, or there's a state of being. They'll understand that they use punctuation, different punctuation for different sentences, and so on. It's not a writing, so I'm not going to get into that. But has the curriculum been broken down into the appropriate chunks of knowledge, and have those chunks been organized in a sequence that is logical for acquiring that particular piece of information? We think history, and you want children to have an understanding about where events happen in time and the legacy of them. It might start with an understanding about time and it being sequential, and you know how we've got today, this week, this year, last year, you know, and you go back like that. Can they put things on a timeline so that they know that the millennium is in the recent past, but the Victorians are in the not so recent past, and then we've got Vikings in the ancient past? I might have got those time periods wrong, but just to give you an example. They will also think about the rigor of subject-specific planning. And when they say rigor, they mean the extent to which there is the pedagogy and the language of the particular subject. And there is a specific definition for rigor. And I think that they define it at the end of that paragraph. It might be paragraph 239. So it's advisable then for you to do a bit of an evaluation of your curriculum. So here's an example that was put together. I believe that one of our consultants put this together for a different package that we used to use. But so is the curriculum ambitious? So yes, a bit? No, I don't know. Is the curriculum ambitious for all children? Is it planned and sequenced? I won't read out all of those things, but it's advisable for you to do an evaluation of it, because obviously where you've got some know or don't know, those are going to be action points, and they're going to be action points in line with your school's development plan. So those points, along with what your school development plan are asking for, wherever your overlap is, those are your priorities for this particular year. So we've done intent, bigger picture intent. Implementation is largely where you come in and the teachers in school. So it is at the point of delivery. This is how well are teachers turning the curriculum plans into learning and experiences in the classroom for children. So it's covered in paragraph 236. Inspectors will be thinking about how the curriculum is taught and assessed in order to support pupils to build that knowledge. So as I said, it's that point of delivery, what is happening in the classroom and where things are not being delivered, where there needs to be adaptations, how are we making those adaptations? So that's the implementation section. And it does include, so this includes how well the subject is presented to ensure that pupils understand key concepts. So it does include thinking about long-term memory, thinking about where one particular unit of learning fits into a bigger picture sequence of learning. And typically they will test that with pupil conferencing, work sampling, as well as lesson visits, so that they literally will just talk to children and ask them. A little bit more on implementation. So it includes having a think about how assessment is used to check pupils' understanding of the curriculum intent alongside identify misunderstandings. So you remember that slide a few slides ago where I was saying that your assessments should be assessing what has been taught instead of teaching what will be assessed. So here we've designed the curriculum in line with what the community needs, what these children will need for their next steps moving forward. And then the assessments are checking that the curriculum has been delivered and the children have understood it. And if the children haven't understood the curriculum, we're making adaptations to the curriculum. Both be thinking, okay, children in year 4 couldn't do whatever it was that needed to do for year 4. So for the rest of year 4 or in year 5, they might need an adaptation or an intervention, but you might also need to look at the units of learning for year 3 or year 2. Are they sufficient to build the basis of knowledge that children needed to access in year 4? So it's a bigger picture when we're thinking about that implementation. But as far as assessment is concerned, decide your curriculum and then plan an assessment that tests the curriculum. Don't plan your curriculum around the assessment. I sometimes get some pushback from teachers around like the teacher assessment frameworks for writing or around the SATs for Key Stage 2. Now, the idea is that those kinds of assessments are assessing the existing primary national curriculum. If you cover the primary national curriculum as a minimum starting point, children will automatically have been taught what they need to know for those end of unit assessments. So we're not saying teach what's in the assessment, we're saying teach what's in the curriculum and then assess what's in the curriculum. At this point in the year, you may and may not have taught, I don't know, statistics, map reading, whatever it is. Then an assessment that includes statistics and map reading that children can't do is pointless. Teachers already know that children are probably going to struggle on that bit because I haven't taught them that yet. I haven't reminded them of that. I've gone off on a tangent. Let me get back on track. So the last bit then around implementation is it's thinking about whether teachers have got expert knowledge of the subjects they teach, or they're supported to address the gaps in their knowledge so that pupils are not disadvantaged by ineffective teaching. So what that means is, you know, when I was talking about your monitoring. So you're talking to children about what they've been able to learn. And for whatever reason, you've realized that all of the children in the dean's class tend to struggle to talk about long division. Okay, it might be that we need to have a think about supporting the dean's subject knowledge for long division. That's what we're thinking. Do your teachers have adequate expert knowledge of the things that they need to teach? And where they don't, what can you do as the subject lead to support that? It doesn't mean that you specifically have to go and upskill them. It might just be that you've worked out Nadine needs some support with long division, and you've told her to go and upskill herself, read this blog, or you've found a particular course, or you've spoken to your senior leaders and you've said, Nadine's really struggling with long division. Is there anything coming up that's going to deal with that? It just means that you make it happen. It doesn't mean that you particularly have to be the one that delivers update training to them. On occasion, and sometimes it's quite a few occasions, there isn't time and there isn't scope in your school year, the CPD cycle, to upskill all teachers on everything. So it might be that in a particular aspect of your subject, or even for particular subjects, that there isn't the opportunity for that CPD. So part of what you might be doing is saying, I know that there is an issue around the concept of empire, and it's going to be addressed in autumn term, and that's going to be fine because children are not going to be exposed to units where they're exploring concepts of empire until autumn 2 or until spring or whatever it is. So it doesn't have to be that it's happening right now. It just has to be that you know what teachers are good at or not, and there is a plan in place that will support them before they teach children from their position of not knowing. I hope that makes. In fact, I don't know that makes sense. Okay, so then the last bit is impact. Paragraph 237. So inspectors will be considering the outcomes that pupils are able to achieve as a result of the education. So the impact here then, we're thinking about, hold on. Sorry. Okay. So this bit here, we're thinking about the data, the extent to which children have been able to secure the curriculum that you've been delivering to them. And it's not only data, but it is largely data. So it will include a view of how pupils are progressing. It will include their view on schemes of work, long-term planning, whatever it is. And while I'm talking about long-term planning, there is no preferred style from an Ofsted point of view. Whatever you're using in school already, that is absolutely fine. If it works for the school, then it works. No problems at all. Okay, so just a quick thing here then around your subjects. Ofsted have put together some really, honestly, really high quality and very useful webinars around some of the major curricular areas, what subject leadership looks like in those specific areas, and some of the subject specific considerations that you need to have. So on their YouTube channel at Ofsted News, you literally can Google them. It'll be the first search return that comes up. I highly recommend watching them. So there's one for PE, history, science, music, geography, and then there's one on PD. There is also one on attendance. There's one on SEND. They've got lots of them. So obviously what I'm doing today is a generic subject leadership. Those particular webinars will give you some specifics around areas of your particular curriculum that you want to have a look at. Okay, so that's the overview, okay? Those 3 I's that we've heard lots of people talking about. So when we're thinking then of Ofsted evaluating your curriculum, they might ask you things like, what monitoring activities have you completed? Are you given time to do that? Do you have evidence? What have these things told you? They're not trying to trip you up. They are just interested in the extent to which you are enabled to lead your subject. So if your head teacher knows that you're going to be having a deep dive, they will have given you some time to monitor your subject and so on. But regardless of whether you've had time out or not, you might be saying, I have spoken to children at break times and lunch times over the past, every Thursday, because I'm on break time duty. I do it on a Thursday. It doesn't give me a real solid understanding because it depends on which children come and talk to me on that particular day and what they've remembered from their lessons. But this is what I've known. And as a result of that, I decided to go and specifically look at books for a given year group, which gave me more information or whatever. So you're going to start to follow a particular trail. I've sat in feedback sessions where inspectors are saying subject leads have got a good understanding about what needs done, but they do need more time, and the recommendations are around leaders giving them more time or giving them more support or whatever it is. They're not trying to trip you up and give you a hard time. They really are trying to work out, what do you know? How do you know it? What have you decided as a result of the information that you've been able to pick up? So it's worth you practicing this. And it might be that you get together with, I don't know, 2 or 3 other subject leads in your school. Maybe you work with the teaching and learning lead and practice the answers to some of these questions. But they really just want to know that the activity happening in your school is evidence-based. It's based on the information that you've gleaned from walking through lessons and talking to children and looking at books and so on. They are always going to be wanting to know the so what, as in, I did X, for example, I did a planning scrutiny. It showed me that let's just keep using me as an example. I did a planning scrutiny. It showed me that Nadine's planning around concept of empire was really robust. And so I took that piece of planning and I shared it with other teachers across the year group, and the impact was that other people's planning improved, right? So, or it might be I looked at planning and Nadine's planning didn't include enough indications around checking on people's knowledge. So I sat with her and did some team planning, or I pointed her in the direction of this other person who does great spaced retrieval. And the result of that is that Nadine is now planning with spaced retrieval, and children are now remembering more of their curriculum. So it's that so what did you find out? What did you do? And as a result of that, what is now the position for your subject? So with all of that in mind, having gone over those questions for yourself, what monitoring activities have you done? Do you have time to do them? What evidence have you got from that? What follow-up actions have there been, and what's your so what? What do you need to do next? What do you need to find out? Have that in mind for your next round of subject leadership activities. So in that same paragraph, and when you have a look at it, if you haven't already, it's one of the longer paragraphs in the framework. It covers, I'm doing that with my hands, you can't see it. It covers quite a lot. So one aspect of it is pupils. And when they're talking about pupils, for example, you'll want to have a think about, what do you want a year 6 pupil to leave being able to know, do, and remember in your subject? And that's one of those, the planning towards the end points. But if you can have in mind a year 6 child that leaves our school, what will they know? What will be the sum of their knowledge? What will they be able to do? What will they remember? How are they set up for Key Stage 3? So if you've got that in mind and you know what you want them to do, you can track backwards in terms of what the curriculum does to prepare them. So what are the key milestones, and how do you check that children have met them? So you want year 6 children to leave you having a really good understanding of of critical thinking, for example. What are the key milestones? What do you want them to be able to do by the end of year 4, year 2? How do you check whether or not children have got a good understanding around critical thinking? We track those things backwards. And then I've talked about this one already. How does your subject prepare children for the next key stage? So as I said, those transitions into early years to key stage 1 and so on. Now, a task for you, we're not going to do it right now, but it's something for you to be thinking about the next time that you have some release time, or the next time that you decide, I used to do it on a Wednesday evening. You know, children have gone home. I'm not marking books on a Wednesday. I am doing this particular activity. And the reason I got away with that, by the way, is because I used to come in early on a Thursday and mark the books then, but separate conversation. So the task with pupils. So collect some work samples, and then using those work samples, has the curriculum enabled pupils to learn the intention set? So you'll know, for example, what your year 3, year 5 curriculum was asking children to do. From the work samples, are the children able to do that? Are children achieving? Now, okay, I've said using this, I've taken this slide from somewhere else, but they're using the prompts on the previous slide and the books. Can you describe how a pupil has been able to meet that intention? So what is it that children have been able to do? What does the evidence in their books, how do you know that they have met the intention for that particular session? So are you able to have that kind of discussion? And off the back of what you're looking at for a given piece of work, are you able to track forwards and backwards? Because they've been able to do this, their prior learning has been robust enough to enable them to achieve what they're doing right now, and they will be able to achieve the intention for the next unit and so on. If they've not been able to do that particular thing, is it because their prior learning was insecure? Maybe, and maybe not. Is it because in that particular lesson, they needed an additional scaffold support, you know, whatever it is, maybe, maybe not. So are you able to work out how the performance in a particular piece of work relates to children being able to achieve the curriculum intention overall? There's just a task for you to have a think about with books. Now, thinking about pupil groups, I talked about this a little bit with SEN children, but how are they at EAL, any group of children, how are they supported in a given subject? Are there particular adaptations that need to be in place? Is there any support? Is the ambition high enough, not high enough, whatever it is? Just be mindful about that. You may and may not be using one-page profiles or a version of them. But if you've got children who are on a particular support plan, they might not be SEND children, but they might need a support plan for whatever other reason. How are they used? Do you have examples that you can show and say, I know that this person needs brain breaks and here's what it looks like in my subject? Can you talk about that progress, and can you give examples of how children have progressed? So just a quick thing on that, by the way, if you do have children who are on an intervention, so typically it will be that they are early stage readers and they're on a phonics intervention, even into key stage 2, if they're not yet reading, they do need those interventions. But have you given consideration to how those children achieve in your subject? And in some schools, they say we vary the timetable so children don't always miss the same session. And that is so valuable. So if you're able to do that, that works really well. But even then, if we're saying, for example, that year 4 history, children were learning about the experiences or the legacy of I don't know, the Tudors, okay, King Henry VIII. And so the children have done an activity, they've learned all about the different wives, and they're writing a diary to show the king's personal reflections on a particular experience. You've got a child who heard the teacher's really good input, went out for an intervention, and then came back. So they haven't done that piece of work. They don't have that aid memoir in their book, but they are in the next history session. What will happen, or how will that child be supported to recall the learning from an activity they haven't done? So they've heard the teaching, but they haven't done the activities. They haven't done the bit where they turn the teaching into learning and change their long-term memory. But they're in for the next session. So now we're expecting them to be able to keep going, build on that, use whatever they remember from the previous session and this particular session, and do well moving forward. That is a really long and convoluted way of saying where children miss things, even the tiniest thing. Are we mindful about the impact that that will have? And obviously they have to miss something in order to catch up with reading. I'm not for a second saying they shouldn't, but it might be that we adapt to that, and we are saying that the main thing that children needed to understand was that monarchy need heirs. They need heirs to the throne, and so it was really important to have children as a product of marriage. So even if you don't do the diary piece that shows the experience of a king whose wife, you know, kept having girls or whatever it is, even if they haven't done the diary writing piece, you've got that overarching, this is the important piece of information that you needed. You might drop that into dictation. You might drop it into exit tickets. It might be early morning work. It might just be things that the teacher is saying constantly, because, you know, there are children who won't do that particular activity, but in next week's history lesson, we're not going over it. We're going to move forward, and they need that key piece of learning. So I hope what I've conveyed to you there is the idea that if children are on an intervention, we're mindful about how they continue to make progress across the rest of the curriculum. And typically that means changing the expectation of what a child will have recorded in their books, but not reducing the overall expectation of what a child would be able to do. Takes some really careful thinking, but it is important. Okay, so anyway, moving on a bit. Let me just see if I can, I've got something in the way here. Let me see if I can move it out of the way. That might be a bit better. Okay, so paragraph 260 then, as I said, thinking about deep dive and looking at people's books, inspectors will look at samples of books. Now, what they're doing, they're not checking on the quality in a given book. That might be something that you're doing when you look at people work. Inspectors will be thinking about whether or not the curriculum is being delivered in the way it was planned. So it's day 2 of week 2 of spring 2. What did your curriculum plan for children to be achieving in your subject in this particular week? And is that particular thing being covered? Okay. So it's around that testing, that system. Are teachers delivering in line with what they're supposed to be delivering? If there have been adaptations, that's absolutely fine, but you just don't want that to be a surprise. So either you've adapted the website because you know that a particular unit didn't get delivered during COVID, whatever it is, or when you've had that conversation with the inspectors, you've said to them, well, I already know that year 5 are going to be doing this particular thing. They're looking at adverts instead of looking at non-chronological reports or whatever it is. So it's not a surprise that's happened, and you've had the opportunity to have a discussion around why there is something different happening. But so as I said, their focus when they're looking at pupils' work is the curriculum as planned being delivered in the way that you intended? And if so, is that turning into children knowing more and being able to do more as a result of your curriculum? So it's less about the quality in an individual piece of work, and it's more about how that piece of work represents the bigger picture of the curriculum. Okay, So with that in mind, then, if you have had a chance to do some work scrutiny, what has that told you about the quality in your particular subject? Are children on track for the plan? And are they able to know more and do more? How do you know? Is the curriculum well sequenced? Yeah, as I said there. And is there evidence that they're developing, their skills incrementally? Okay, so here we go. Now, this is a little bit repetitive and deliberate, because I know that when we say things that in lots of different ways, we get the message through. So, but have you thought about the evidence of your curriculum across the unit, across the school year, and the key stage? Remember, we're thinking, what are those milestones? Are children on track for meeting the individual milestones? Remember all the way back to the beginning when I was talking about formative leadership rather than formative assessment? Do we know what we're aiming for across the term, and are we checking on that? So if we're looking at a particular child's piece of work, well, how does that indicate their progress through the unit, their progress through the school year, their progress through the particular key stage? And then, are there adaptations? Do you want SEND children to have a different flight plan? Probably not, but make that really clear. We expect them to have the exact same flight plan. If we do make adaptations, this is what it would look like for this particular child, which is different. Obviously, you know that for all the other children. But for high prior attainers, typically when we say high prior attainers, those are children who were achieving really well at key stage 1 and maybe are not keeping up with that achieving at key stage 2, but they're expected, which looks okay. But if they were working at greater depth at key stage 1, then expected is actually not keeping up. Anyway, there's a whole session on attainment, so we'll get there. But yeah, so what is it that you want to be happening in your subject? Now, here I've just got a little comment around being aware about your subject being the vehicle of another. So typically, and I tend to support schools with English, but we often find that books are the vehicle, like, you know, the reading curriculum drives everything else in the school. And that's great, but you also want to be mindful that your curriculum, let's say history, for example, it needs to cover concepts of empire and legacy, and perhaps all of the historical books that are being focused on are not covering your particular subject aims. You've got to be mindful of that as a subject lead. That doesn't mean that you're able just to change the entire curriculum, but it does mean that you ask the question. You ask it of your leadership team, or you ask it of the reading lead or whoever it is. You're just really mindful of one subject not being hijacked for another one. So what's another example of that? So for example, PE and science, that maybe children are out doing a PE session and they're looking at they're doing throwing and catching, and the science lead wants it to be a focus around angles and force and velocity and all those things, and you're kind of going, no, I'm the PE lead, I really want them just to be able to throw and catch accurately. You've got to just be mindful that yes, there are links where the links go, but also your subject is important in its own right, and it shouldn't become the vehicle of another subject. Ideally, all subject leads are working together, so you've worked out how to make sure that the aims of all the individual subjects are covered where you've got cross-curricular activity happening. Okay, and I'm going to whiz, just in the interest of time, I'm going to whiz over this one a little bit, but when we're thinking about recording your monitoring, is there a monitoring evaluation cycle in school? If there is, obviously you can follow that. You might want to put your own one together so that you know, like as I said, as an example, on a Wednesday, I always had a particular monitoring activity that I was doing, and typically it was books, but I'd alternate that with planning. Anyway, so have a really specific idea around what it is you want to look at and when you want to look at those things. Consider whether you need a template. There are templates all over the internet for these things. I've got a few, so you can drop me a line directly if you want some specific templates. I think there's an example of one on a couple of slides in. But the important thing about templates is just feel free to change them. Make sure that the template records what you want in your school. Much like I said, the assessments should assess what you've taught, not teach what will be assessed. The template is the same. The template should record what you have done. You shouldn't do what will be recorded, if that makes sense. So have templates, themes around evaluation. So just be thinking about whether or not you've got particular teachers who need your support, strengths that you can signpost them to. And then the last thing here is around work samples. So they're really best looked at with children present. Obviously, we don't have much time for this. So if another subject lead has got some release time and they're looking at books, you just might have one key line. When you're looking at books, you know, you might say to the maths lead, when you're looking at books, if you get a chance, can you let me know whether there's any evidence of children I don't know, scaling their calculations because they're going to need to use that in DT or whatever it is. Just be mindful about how the two subjects might be able to work together. And now my comment around best looked at with children is look at the books on your own, answer as many questions about your key lines as you possibly can. And then when you do get a chance to have release time in the school day so that you can talk to children, ask them the questions you couldn't work out from their books. So we're not just in general wanting children to tell us all the fabulous things they're learning, but we do want them like to fill in the gaps. I think there's a session with the People Book Study where we go over that in a bit more detail. So yeah. Okay, so now thinking about, I think this is where it comes in actually, quality assuring your curriculum. So as I said, start with your planned curricular outcomes. So what is it that you wanted children to be able to do? Start your assessment there. And then think about how those outcomes are going to be assessed. Let me just, there we go. Does teaching prepare children for the different demands of recording? So for example, reading comprehension, typically I hear teachers saying, and I used to do this myself, answer those questions in full sentences. That session I was delivering a couple of weeks ago, one of the year 6 teachers said to me, but when we do a SATs practice or when we're doing a reading comprehension, speed is important. So when I don't want them to be writing in full sentences when they're doing a reading comprehension, that's like a mid-unit test. But in normal lessons, I want them answering in full sentences. Just think about your rationale for what it is you want children to do. Is it that you want them to know and communicate the answer to a particular question? Or are they practicing sentence level work? If they need to practice sentence level work, by all means, that's what they should be doing. But it's worthwhile making it clear to children the difference between how we record learning and how that is different to how we perform on assessments. And there is something at the very beginning of the national curriculum. It does talk about teaching children the language of assessments and the difference between assessment and learning and so on. So we're not deviating from the national curriculum when I say that. Consider what mastery in your subject would look like at different points. So we're halfway through the school year. What does mastery look like at this point? So there'll be things that have not yet been covered. Does that mean that nobody is mastering history right now? Probably not. It just means that for what has been covered, this is the extent to which I expect children to talk about their learning, to have retained their learning and to be able to use it in other subjects and in other units. So be really mindful about what mastery looks like at different points in the year and what you're reasonably expecting children to be able to do. Okay, and then I've talked about templates, so I'm not going to get into this one very much. So now, as I mentioned about People Book Study, so this is something that I think it's Alex Bedford has written a book called People Book Study and has a whole unit of of learning around it, linked with Unity Research School, I believe. We have that session running at BEP, so you can buy into that. You can also buy the book and work from it yourself. Either way, it's a really useful set of statements to consider and different lenses to look at your curriculum through to answer really specific questions. It takes you on a really well-formed journey to quality assuring your curriculum. Alex does it far better than me, so I'm not going to get into it, but either buy the book, buy into the People Book Study sessions that we do, but really, really useful. Gives you questions to ask your children, gives you an indication of if they say this, that's good for your curriculum, or it's not good for your curriculum, here's what to do about it. So it makes it really, really, really easy for you. Okay, so more. So thinking then about your specific scheme of work, SOW, scheme of work in your subject, okay, what will the difference be between a working towards an expected and greater depth? How will you know? What is it that you want teachers to look for so that they're able to say, this piece of evidence, this conversation, this learning, whatever it is in line with expected greater depth or working towards? Keeping expectations high, so just be really mindful, using what you know about the pupils. Where do you want them to be by the end of the unit? So this is a good example of the difference between the curriculum telling you about the children or telling you about the subject. So where you know that you've got a particular cohort of children where, for example, persistent absence is really high, or they've historically been a low attaining group for whatever reason, and there's a wider support package in school around how to help these children move forward. But you might be saying in the 23-24 cycle, I expect year 4 children to, 80% of them to be working at the expectation or higher. But in other academic cycles, I expect 95% of them. I mean, obviously I went super high in terms of what I'm expecting, but aim high for what it is that children are able to do. Be really mindful that I know this cohort are going to exceed that expectation for these reasons, but in general I know that this is the expectation for year 4. So have your generic, this is what my curriculum should be able to do, and then you're welcome to have an adaptation that says, this is the deviation for this cohort this year, because here is a plan for the catch up for them, but other year groups are going to meet my expectation. So just be really clear about what children are going to be able to achieve and the difference between children achieving and the curriculum achieving. And then, yeah, if they're not on track, what is it that you expect teachers to be doing? What do you expect to hear children talking about that will be bringing them back on track, back in line with your expectations? If things need to be retaught, moved around, revisited, skipped over, whatever, how do teachers know what they can skip over, what their priorities are? So back when we were talking about intent, is it really clear to teachers that across this particular geography unit, I want children to understand the differences between physical and natural, is that even the right language, between different landscape features? Is it really important to teachers which 3 things children absolutely must know and which things are extras? Because if you make it really clear, these are the core elements of learning. If children don't get these, you must go back and reteach it because they need that moving forward. And then these other elements of the curriculum, these are nice to knows, these are additionals. If they don't get them, it's okay to keep going. Do teachers know that? Do you know that? It's worth having a think about what your curriculum is doing and how you're signaling to teachers what they should cover and what they can skip over. So people conferencing, Can your children respond to these kinds of questions? So does the curriculum enable you? How do you know? Can you tell me about the subject? What will you be able to do by the end of this lesson, this week, this term? How would the knowledge you learn today help you to complete the final task for the unit? Children are incredibly loyal. They want to absolutely show their teachers in the best light. So they will strive to answer these questions. It's really worth you and your teachers giving them this information. So saying to them, today, we're going to be learning, we're going to be practicing our times tables. And that's really going to help you, because on Friday, we're going to be calculating with fractions, and you need to be able to use your times tables in their decimals in order to respond to whatever it is. You need to really make it clear to children how what they're doing right now is going to help them with something that's coming. Or remember last week we practiced our times tables. Today we're going to use that learning to make sure that we can calculate with our fractions, whatever it is. But practice with them so that they can understand those things. So a quick monitoring template as far as people conferencing. So this is one that I used not at my last school, the one before, down in London. So what I've lost my thought because I'm looking at this list here. Okay, so what have you learned about in history? What is the end outcome for that unit? What do you know that you didn't know before? Can you remember any key vocabulary? So I'm not going to read out all of the questions on there, but there are some example questions. Depending on what it is that you are doing with your curriculum, you might want to change those questions. You might also, and I recommend this, have a look at paragraph 238 in the Ofsted framework, because that's the bit where they're talking about how they will use information from pupils to start to inform a judgment around the evaluation of a particular curriculum area. So whatever those questions are or statements, you want to make sure that you're covering them when you do your conferencing with pupils. Of course, this kind of conferencing is not going to be done in the playground when you're on duty or whatever, but you might be able to say to your head teacher, every time that I'm on playground duty, I ask children, what have you learned today that what did you know today that you didn't know previously? They often can't answer that question for me. I really need some time to go into that a bit deeper with this group of children, with the SEND children, with the pupil premium children, with the greater depth children, with the high priority, whatever it is. Be really specific about what information you want to find out, from who, and why you need that information. And your leadership team are far more likely to grant you ad hoc release. Or when you get your release time, you will know exactly what you're going to do with the time that you've been given. So I talked about that briefly. Is there anything that you would keep or get rid of from there? Are there particular groups of children that you would want to focus on? So then there's quite a lot here around talking to children. And the reason there's a lot in there around talking to children is because of all the things you could do. They'll record things in their books. And I've worked with teachers who are amazing, and the work in children's books is also in their heads. And I've also worked with teachers who are amazing, but the work in their books is not the same as what children tell me. And so what I'm saying is the book on its own is not a reliable indicator about how much children know or how well your curriculum is doing. The only reliable indicator about how well your curriculum is doing is what children can say and demonstrate and do as a result of their learning. So you need to talk to them. Okay, now this element about keep up, catch up. I think I talked about this briefly when I was going over interventions, but just be really mindful that if they are on an intervention, what are they going to do to catch up with whatever they've missed in the intervention? How long will it last? How do you know when the intervention is going to be finished? Who's going to check it? Are you keeping track of, teachers will say we change the timetable so children don't always miss the same subjects. Are you checking on that? Do you know that that genuinely does happen? Or is it a really easy oversight where we just, because of hall timetable and room timetables and whatever else it is, PE has to always be at a given time? So are you mindful about that? And then specifically with SEN pupils, they do need to develop and make progress from their starting point. So you do specifically need to know what will development look like for those children in your subject. Are they keeping up? What will be the next steps for a given group of children? Okay, so I've talked about all of these things. Does the work enable children, teachers' subject knowledge? And then, yeah, so I mean, we'll all know this because early reading will be part of any inspection, but reading will need to be prioritized. Obviously, children move from that learning to read to reading to learn. So that's really, really important. But yeah, are teachers and leaders using assessment well? Does the environment support children's knowledge acquisition? Do teachers have good subject knowledge? And does the work actually enable children to do whatever the curriculum is asking them to do? Okay, I think we're coming to the end. I'm hoping I'm going to stop at 5:02, so we've got time for questions. I've got 5 minutes left. When you are presenting to governors, and especially if your school is expecting to be inspected by Ofsted at some time soon, your role as far as that report is going to be around providing assurance that the curriculum is meeting the statements in the grade descriptor for good or outstanding. So whatever it is that your school are aiming for, to what extent can your subject demonstrate that you're meeting those particular statements? So they are in paragraph 454 for good and 453 for outstanding. What particular things will you need? Go through those paragraphs, and then you'll know what you need to share with them. Like, as in, what are your next steps for your curriculum? What is happening that's happening really well, and what isn't, but you need to action it. So that was my task. I'll leave that for you as another task. Go through those particular paragraphs and just choose whichever one your school's aiming for. So if your school is aiming for outstanding, go through 453. In fact, if you're aiming for outstanding, you need to do everything in 454 really well, and then the things in 453. If you're aiming for good, then you need to be doing all the things in 454. Okay. And then here is just a suggestion about headings that you might include in your subject report. It's a suggestion, as I said, for some subjects and in some schools, you don't need to report on your subject. In other schools, you do. If you do, here are some suggestions of questions that you might want to have a look at. They are in the slides. So when you have a look at them, when you get them, you can have a look at those pointers in a bit more detail. Okay, then I've talked about that earlier in the session. Here are the links for your subject associations. Mary Myatt's got some really great work on the curriculum, so it's definitely worth having a look at that. This is the section I wanted to talk you through. I think there's a template here. So I'd already said, look at your SDP, find where your subject fits in that SDP. And then having found that, what tasks will you need to put in place to complete that particular strategic aim? Who needs to do them? When will they need to be done by? And what will be the impact? I whizzed over that because I wanted to show you this page where I've given an example of completing them. So let's say, for example, the overall aim was that pupils needed to know, remember, and do more. I feel like that's a generic one that no school's going to disagree with. How will we get that? How will I know? So what are going to be the tasks? It might be do a book monitoring. It might be talk with pupils. It might be review the assessment in my particular subject so that I know what that expectation is. And as you can see through the rest of that form, I've looked at who's going to do it, when will it be done, what is the impact of it, and where will that evidence be seen, or where will that evidence be seen or recorded. So there's an example of an action planning template. I think we're pretty much, there we go.